evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to give you a very warm welcome to the Greenhills Community Hall here in, well, the best part of East Kilbride. It's the part I come from. For tonight's latest Yes East Kilbride speakers event. So Yes East Kilbride, I'm sure you know what we do. We're currently working through a campaign to cover as much of the town again. Also, we've not got a referendum in our hands just yet, but we're here to make sure that we are giving an alternative to what you're getting from the mainstream media. You get the chance for people across the community to come and hear not just fantastic speakers, but a chance to actually get involved and ask the questions that are important to you. So just a wee bit about tonight's format. We're going to start off, we'll hear from each of the respective speakers. And then after that, we'll open up the debate by offering questions, obviously, to the floor and indeed to the folks that are watching across the Independence Live service tonight. So, as I said, this is the first in a series of events that we'll be having across East Kilbride. Tonight's subject is obviously on the subject of From No to Yes. Now, we're now 3 years since the last independence referendum. 3 years. Wow, flew past. And it's amazing that in that time so much has changed. Probably more than certainly any of us that were involved in the campaign at the time would have probably imagined. We've got being dragged out Europe. You know, we've got the absolute destruction of the Scottish Labour Party, the stronghold it had been certainly in all my lifetime. And also many more changes that, you know, just again, the fact of the matter is that the landscape of the debate has entirely changed since 2014. And one of the key points, and certainly the reason that we chose tonight, subject to be from No to Yes, is mainly around the fact that if we look, for example, Dr. DL from the, what's his name again? Dr. DL, so I need to worry about, I'll give the details later. He done a recent study in behalf of looking at statistically what's the situation with regards to the voters' views since 2014. Because obviously with all that turmoil and change, we must have thought, yeah, surely things have changed, people have changed. Now, although that data is dated from February, the reality is he suggests that if the vote was to take place tomorrow, it would probably be the same result. You'd have 55-45. And that might be quite surprising. But the key part about this is that obviously, if that's still the case, if we're to achieve independence and all the promise and hope and things we want to achieve off the back of that, the key is not to alienate people who voted no in the last time around. Most of these people might just be one conversation or one change of state to actually be at the other side of that argument. So, you know, talking down no voters and stuff is not the way to progress to get us towards an independent Scotland. And indeed, our first speaker tonight is probably a great example of that. He's an avid campaigner for social justice. He was a prominent member for the No campaign during the Better Together campaign of 2014. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mike Daly.
Thank you very much, Paul. I first joined the Labour Party. It sounds like a confessional, doesn't it? I'll confess my sins for being so active in the Better Together campaign in 2014. But I first joined the Labour Party at age 16 in Dundee on the East Coast, and I remember George Galloway was there to anoint me. Grew up in a working class scheme, born and bred in a council house in Whitfield in Dundee. Came to Glasgow while still technically a teenager, I think I was 19, to go to university and never left Glasgow. I now find myself a very keen supporter and advocate of Scotland becoming independent, and I find myself also a member of the SNP. So I've been asked to kind of explain how did that happen, and you'd be surprised that it happens a lot more than you think. So maybe it's the case that maybe people don't broadcast it in maybe the way that I've broadcast it, but I do think it's important to talk about going from no to yes, because other people can then think to themselves, well, actually, maybe I should think about that. And certainly friends and colleagues that I've spoken to have said the fact that you've made that journey has resulted in me having a think about the possibility of changing from no to yes. So I think events like this are very important, and I want to talk about my particular journey if we've got time tonight, we could maybe talk about some other issues, and I'll maybe very briefly touch on a couple of other issues, such as the timing of the new Scottish referendum, because there is going to be one, notwithstanding what the Prime Minister says or what Mr Mundell says, there is going to be one. We can maybe talk about Brexit, the EU, the euro, currency, economic issues, and ultimately I think perhaps the most important thing, and I'm certainly very interested to hear what Dennis and Tommy have got to say about this, and that is the vision and ambition for an independent Scotland. Because for me, without that progressive vision and ambition for Scotland, I wouldn't really be supporting independence, because that's what it's all about for me. So I suppose I come very much from the point of view of believing in self-determination. And I know that some people, and I completely respect that some people will believe in Scottish independence for all sorts of different reasons, and some could be emotional, some could be historical, and that's fine. But from my point of view, I'm very much a pragmatist, and I want Scotland to be independent so that we can have a country that is a different country to what we're going to get with the Conservatives. I want a country where everybody's got the same chances in life, regardless of where you come from and what money your parents may have, or even if you don't have any parents that are living, everybody should have the same chances in life, and nobody should get left behind. Nobody should go to bed hungry, and that's happening in our country. We live in one of the richest countries in the world, and there's kids and adults going to bed at night hungry. Nobody should be sleeping rough on our streets. It's unbelievable. That's increased. So these are the kind of things that I want to talk about. But maybe just to start off and say, when we had the referendum back in September 2014, I did, for my sins. But we're a forgiving nation, aren't we? I did speak for Better Together, and I did lots of public meetings and lots of media and lots of. I remember one particular event in Hamilton speaking to 800 16-year-olds who, for the first time, had the vote. That was fantastically exciting. But back then, the message was quite clear that if you voted no, our place in the European Union was guaranteed. I don't know if you remember that. It was an absolute critical message that we had. And it was completely untrue, as it turns out. Last year, when we had the EU referendum, 62% of Scots voted to remain in the EU, but we're being pulled out of the EU, as Paul has said. We've got the Great Repeal Bill making its way through the UK Parliament, and that's going to annul the European Communities Act of 1972. At the moment, you're a citizen of the EU. You're not going to be a citizen of the EU come 2 years down the road. Effectively, the UK Constitution's been rewritten. It has been rewritten. After 45 years, we've got a new Constitution. Now, for anybody that says that's not the game changer, that means there needs to be another referendum on Scottish independence, for me, that event creates the case, a very cogent case, politically, legally, and morally, for another Scottish independence referendum, because the rules have all changed. It's almost like, this just happened last year, but it's almost as if we now live in a completely different world because of what leaving the EU is going to promise for us. So that kind of helped me crystallise my thought process, which probably took maybe the best part of a year. I wouldn't say it was the underlying rationale for me going from no to yes. I think, as I say, it crystallised it, it brought it all together in my mind. And ultimately, I'm going to talk about, I think, what was really kind of underpinning and what was getting at me for probably longer than a year, probably quite a few years, if I'm honest. Now, the Tories like to remind us that the Brexit vote is a UK vote. So all this stuff about Scottish independence, it's the UK that's party to the treaties. But as I say, it's changing our citizenship, it's changing our constitution, and I think it's the most radical constitutional change in my lifetime, which is why I say that is an absolute slam dunk case to have another Scottish independence referendum. Now, I think we should have another referendum before we leave the EU, and the First Minister has certainly taken that position, because that then means that we've got the ability to negotiate. in Scotland's interests. And we've been told by the Prime Minister, no, you're not going to have that opportunity because that may upset the negotiations, which is incredible. We've even had David Mundell, who's even more mischievous and disingenuous, saying that, well, there won't be another Scottish independence referendum until later in the late 2020s, which is incredible. Now, one can only hope and pray that Mr. Mundell loses his seat. He's only got a majority of about 800. I'm just going to touch that wood there, because that would be it would be karma, wouldn't it? So let's hope that we do end up with the more pandas than the Tories in Scotland, and actually we end up with no Tories. And of course the Tories are making out they've got this revival, which I always find quite incredible when you think about this idea that you can look at an STV local government electoral system where you have 10 rounds of votes going there, and suddenly you look at that and you say, well, we can just use that and predict we're going to get 12 seats in Scotland. Aye, right. I think this has got all the making of one massive constitutional crisis, and we can maybe come back to that. You cannot refuse the will of the Scottish Parliament. You cannot refuse to give Scotland an independence referendum when our Parliament has voted for it. Now, there's all sorts of deals that we can have, I think, in terms of the EU. It may well be that it'll take some time to get into the EU as an independent country. But there would be nothing to stop Scotland, for example, joining EFTA, the European Free Trade Association, or the European Economic Area. Iceland, Norway, Switzerland, Liechtenstein are in EFTA. And besides getting free trade because of those memberships, it opens you up to trade with also 500 million people outside the EU. So I think we've got all sorts of opportunities. It's not just about joining the EU. Sure, I would like to see Scotland being in the EU, but there's other things that we could do on the road to that. Now, there's been a lot of mischief made about the EU because if we joined the EU as an independent country, we would have to adopt the euro. Don't believe the hype, as they say, because there are currently 8 EU member states who don't use the euro. So it is perfectly reasonable to join the EU and not be required to use the euro immediately or for some number of years. It isn't the case that automatically you need to join and start using the euro. So I think there's a lot of information that's put out to confuse people and to worry people, and we need to nail down those issues. But if I can get back to, why do I back an independent Scotland, and why did I join the SNP? And let me just stop and say the independence is way bigger than any one political party. It's a matter for everybody in Scotland. And it's for people that are not in any political party whatsoever. It's for everybody. And the one thing that I love about this notion that we all embrace in having Scotland become independent is that you could be Scottish just by simply moving here. Now, it's quite remarkable when you look across the EU and you look at the rise of very ugly nationalism, your Nigel Farage's and the variations thereof in various countries, whether it's the Netherlands or Germany or France, the Marianne Le Pen's. But if you look at the nationalism that we are talking about in Scotland, it's completely inclusive. It's about self-determination. There's not 1 ounce of ugliness about it. But there is ugliness when you look at the Conservative Party and you look at Brexit and you look at what's fueling that debate. And what's fueling that debate is xenophobia, a hatred for people that are different to us. It used to be the single mums. It used to be people who had a different colour to your skin colour. It used to be people who were gypsy travellers. It used to be the Irish, used to be the Jewish, used to be Pakistani. If you go back in time, there's always been people scapegoated. And at the heart of scapegoating, you'll find a Tory. So I believe that Scotland's got 2 futures ahead of her. As Paul says, we can be pulled out of the EU against our will. Bad for our financial services sector, because you need passporting under EU law to be able to interact with the 600 million people in the EU zone. I think we're going to end up losing lots of jobs with Brexit. I've got no doubt in my mind about that. And I think there's massive opportunities for an independent Scotland working with our European countries. And I have to say very quickly, we've always been European as a nation. If you think back to the Scottish Enlightenment, which is going back to the 18th century and before, you've got the great thinkers, Adam Smith, David Hume, great engineers. You had all of this incredible talent in Scotland, people were always connected ultimately with different European nations. So we've got a massive history. Even our legal system is connected to Europe. We've got a Roman law system at the base of Scots law, which is not the position for England. So we've always been Europeans, and I certainly feel that I'm a European. But my primary motivation, I think I would say, is this. I don't want to live in the kind of country that Ruth Davidson and Theresa May is offering the people. They talk about how they're the party for the working class. I've never heard such nonsense in my life. All they care about is what the Americans refer to as the 1%ers. The 1% at the very top, the cream at the top of the milk, who have got all of the assets, all of the resources, and they make money from workers because all they have to do is put their capital to work. And you do the work, I do the work, and they make the money. That's all the Tories care about. I don't want to live in a country that has that at its heart. And it's worse than that. So the direction of travel at Westminster for me has been out of step with Scotland and what I believe in for a long time. Benefit sanctions, the Victorian values of the deserving poor and the undeserving poor. You remember the Tories used to put people that were poor in the workhouse, or they put you up a chimney to clean a chimney. That's what they believe in. That's at the heart of the benefit system. People been living on money that's much less than you can possibly get by on, because you didn't go down to the job centre because you're looking after a sick Wayne, right? When you look at when the Tories came into power in 2010, there's a graph looking at the number of sanctions where people get their benefits docked, and it goes up, I kid you not, exponentially like that. And that's the Tories. That's what they've done. Not only do they want to give you nothing, and they want you to pay for everything through your taxes, but this is what I really dislike. I wouldn't use the word hate because I don't hate anybody. But I completely dislike and detest the fact that the Tories, notwithstanding all of the nasty things that I've talked about, they want to punish people. They want them to have misery. And that's what's at the core of people like Ruth Davidson. The rape clause, as it's referred to. Having a third child, you get no tax credits for. And Ruth Davidson thinks that that's okay. And if you were raped, you've got to fill in a massive, great big form. This is what the Tories are about. I don't want to live in that type of country. And austerity is a myth. If you look at the policies that Osborne introduced from 2010 under the guise of austerity, now we didn't need to introduce austerity because the financial crisis was worldwide. Starts very much in America, but banking's global. And it comes from the shadow banking market, it comes from derivatives, from COCOs, all these different forms of effectively giving people money, secure on assets that had no real value. People couldn't afford to pay things. Then you slice them, dice them, sell them, and ultimately they're packaged and sold. And eventually that bubble bursts, and it did burst. And so what then happened in the UK was that we bailed out the banks. And things are a bit different in America. Lots of people got prosecuted in America, people that were ultimately indulging in moral hazard, casino gambling, banking with other people's money. America did prosecutions. Do you know the only person that was prosecuted in the UK during the financial crisis was the guy that ran the Land of Leather. The folk that sell you sofas because they did credit as well. Nobody else got prosecuted. That's the Tories for you, ultimately. And I have to say, the Human Rights Act is on the list of things to go from the Conservatives. So I'm thinking, look, this is what really motivates me. The idea of another 15, 20 years of these guys in power at Westminster, dishing out more austerity and more misery. For me, I'm not having it. I want Scotland to become independent so we can say, do you know what? You do all that nasty stuff to people. You look after the 1%ers. I want people in this country to do things completely differently, to be egalitarian, to be progressive. And by the way, there'll be a lot of people in England, Wales, and of course Northern Ireland, who will want to come to Scotland. Make no mistake. I mean, London voted to stay in the EU. And we've got lots of space in Scotland, you know, so I can see Scotland have an incredibly prosperous future. Let me just say a couple of things quickly, if I can, about Labour, because I don't forget that when Ed Miliband took the helm, and often we do forget this, all of the abstentions as the Tories sliced our welfare state, Labour did stand back and abstain. And I think they did that because Ed thought he was going to get elected, he was going to PM. So he probably thought, well, actually, we don't want to be too radical because we might then have to inherit this. And to be fair to Jeremy Corbyn, fantastic set of policies. You can't fault the guy in terms of his ethos, his belief, his heart, his soul. But the problem is they're going to lose seats in England and Wales. And that is something that we need to take on board. If you look, for example, there's an IPOS poll that came out today, which is probably the best poll that Labour's had in many years. Well, certainly in the last 2 years in terms of Jeremy. And that puts the Tories with a lead of 15%, which you'll remember the other month, the Tories were on a 21% lead. But it's interesting because they're hoovering up UKIP votes and they're hoovering up votes from Labour. UKIP's now on at 2%, which it was in double figures just last month. And I think what's happening is, I think this is I suppose the genius of Theresa May's plan, which is to mobilise the Brexit voters in a first-past-the-post system to vote Conservative. And if that happens, we're going to see Labour MPs, people who were Labour MPs in England and Wales, lose their seats. So what I'm saying is, I think sadly what's going to happen is we're going to have the Conservatives returned, and I pray that I'm wrong, but we're going to have the Conservatives, I think, returned to Westminster with a bigger majority. I don't think it'll be as big as they hope. I don't think it will be a landslide. But let's say they go from having a majority of 12 to 100. May will take that as a mandate to do even more unspeakable things. Now, that prospect of another 15 years of the Tories running the show is absolutely terrifying from my point of view. And I think if that happens, and certainly from people that I've spoken to, and people in London that I've spoken to in Labour, then I wouldn't be surprised if there's then a breakaway party in Labour in that eventuality, which again fulfills my sort of suggestion that we're going to have the Tories having a clear run of it at Westminster. Meantime, back in Scotland, Scottish Labour's already imploded. The corpse is deed, it's just that nobody's told them they're deed. Maybe somebody should tell them, but nobody's got the heart, have they? And it breaks my... I know I'm laughing, but but you do have to laugh because you couldn't make it up. You could not make up what's going on. Scottish Labour lose 1/3 of the seats for local government, and then they come out and say, actually, we did not that bad, right? They spend all their time criticising independence, as do the Scottish Conservatives. They speak about Scottish independence more than any other party, more than the Greens or the SNP or Solidarity. It's incredible. And yesterday we discovered that Labour councillors in Aberdeen have done a deal with the Tories. Now, what we also discover is that there is also looks like there's going to be a deal in North Lanarkshire and West Lothian. Now, how could you be a Labour Party member and think that it would be better to work with the Tories than to work with the SNP? I hear that in Fife it looks like the SNP could be working with Labour. Now, Labour should be working with the SNP and the Greens, right? Because they're closer in terms of what they believe in than the Conservatives are. But it just goes to show you how dysfunctional politics in the Scottish Labour Party is, that they would rather work with the Conservatives than the Greens or the SNP or anybody else for that matter. So for me, voting yes in a new Scottish independence referendum is the only way forward. It's a future of hope, opportunity, and a society that I want to see, as opposed to what Theresa May and Ruth Davidson offer, which is inequality, darkness, and human misery. And maybe if I could just finish on, because obviously I can go on forever given my given I speak for a living. Tommy could probably go on even longer than me, though. So just to say, in terms of vision and ambition, I just wanted to say some things very, very quickly, if I can, because remember I said at the very outset, I think in the new independence referendum in Scotland, we need to do things differently to 2014. We don't, I mean, if you think about it, all the people that went crazy on social media on both sides, you're effectively probably looking at 200 to 300 people that are just actually speaking to themselves, right? So there's 150 people that are like, you know, no. Then there's another 150 people that are on the yes side going like that. And then it creates all this publicity in the newspapers, all this kind of negative stuff. It's probably about 300 people all in. Maybe we should send them on a holiday, send them to Spain during the referendum so they can have a wee break and just chill out, sit on the beach. And then we can engage in a debate and a discussion where we actually try and persuade people what are the virtues. And I think it's much, much clearer. I mean, people like this, I'm voting yes and I voted no in 2014. Why is it so much clearer? Because we're in a situation where it's so sharp, the options, the crossroads. What Theresa May and Ruth Davidson are offering, which is awful. There'll be no Brexit deal. I guarantee you we're going to walk away from the EU with World Trade Organization default tariffs. I mean, all you have to do is listen to the 27 member states, because that's what they say. There is no sweet deal. Theresa May is completely delusional. You had the president of the EU Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, who, remember, that was leaked the other week, where he went to number 10 for dinner. And the Commission leaked this. And so they're having dinner with the great intellectuals of the Conservative Party, Boris Johnson and David Davis. You couldn't make this up, could you? I mean, if anybody had said that these people are going to be running the country a few years ago, you would say, no, never going to happen. So they're having dinner with Juncker, and of course Theresa May says, we're not paying you the 50 billion, that you say we're due to leave the EU. And he said, oh, well, I won't do that. He said, you're not getting any of the things that you're looking for then, And she was like, oh. So that was, I think, the first course. And you can imagine being a fly on the wall at that dinner. It must have been awful, because there's like no conversation, no chat, just completely opposite positions. So I think Brexit is going to be an almighty disaster. And this idea that May says we're going to get a sweet deal from Donald Trump, really? Really? Do you not read his tweets? Nobody's getting a sweet deal from Donald Trump. So that's the future we've got. This terrible Brexit lurched to the right, with the Conservative Party not just taking the clothes of UKIP, but actually taking them and going even further in their extreme regressive views. And what is the option on the other side of the fence is Scotland doing its own thing, being its own country, doing things differently. And again, to finish on this quickly, what are the kind of things that I would want to see? Well, I want to eradicate rough sleeping and homelessness in Scotland. We could do that. Building houses is an investment. You could build houses. You could, for example, put some pension funds that are sitting away getting rubbish rates, put them to work building houses, social housing, that would have rents that would be coming in, that would pay back that money, for example, to pension funds. Unison has suggested this. Other unions have suggested it. There's all sorts of things we can do. Even just borrowing the money would make sense, because you're going to get it back over 20, 25 years. We build all these houses, we create all these apprentices, we create all these jobs, we abolish homelessness. Now, I know it's a bit more complicated, because sometimes people have particular mental health needs, and there may be addiction problems and so on and so forth, so people need support. But we can do it. There's no reason we can't do it. Food banks. And I know that Dennis has obviously done a tremendous job in terms of the loaves and the fishes. You've literally turned those 5 loaves and 2 fishes into a massive feast. And that's the kind of spirit we've got in Scotland, and that's the kind of spirit we want to see much more of. And we would see much more of it as an independent nation. But I hope you won't mind me saying this, Dennis, But I would like to see food banks become completely unnecessary. No homelessness, no need for food banks in an independent Scotland. Every child having the best education possible, as good as at your private public school. It's always perplexed me as to how they get charitable status, I have to say. But nevertheless, I think we need to make sure that everybody gets the same opportunities in life. We need to sort of our infrastructure. We can invest, you can borrow to invest, improve our rail system, improve our roads. In terms of our railways, nationalise our railways, bring back things into the ownership of the people, and ultimately create jobs at the same time. These are the things we need to do. Workers need new rights, real rights. You know, there's been a 70% reduction in employment tribunal cases across the UK because the Tories introduced fees. £1,200 to go through the ET tribunal, unless you're on a very, very, very low income indeed. So if you're the victim of sex discrimination, unfair dismissal, race discrimination, disability discrimination, you can't access an employment tribunal. Now what that means to me is you've got no access to your legal rights. This idea of the rule of law and everybody being equal before the law becomes redundant. You can't access your rights. We need to scrap that in an independent Scotland. Disabled Scots being penalised for being disabled. They're being charged more to get less services under self-directed support. That's wrong. So these are the type of things we need to have in an independent Scotland. And I'm incredibly optimistic. And as I say, I'm utterly convinced that we will have a Scottish independence referendum, and it won't be that long. We'll have one, we'll demand one, and we'll get one, and we're going to win it. Thank you.
Mike Daly, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's fair to say that most days, and certainly the reason why we're here, is we often think that we'd love to do a bit more for others. You know, we'd love to help our fellow man and people that stay in their street, in their town and village. But a lot of us don't actually get around it. You know, we don't actually go out to help people who really need it and find themselves in a situation through no fault of their own. Thankfully, our next speaker has spent 40 years of his life not just thinking about it, but actually going out and dedicating his time to help people who need help. You know, as Mike said, he kind of stole my thunder. I was thinking of it was, I'd prefer a hobby playing golf or something like that. Because the reality of it is the fact that in this day and age, not in a Charles Dickens novel, but in this day and age, we're a country of our wealth and resources, that the fact that people still require the use of these services is disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. And now over to the man himself, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dennis Curran, MBE.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to tell you my journey. I'm not really a political person, Well, I used to think I wasn't a political person. It'll not be too hard to understand what I'm going to vote for anyway, you know. I'm duty bound. I'm nearly 74. So whatever happens here isn't really going to make a big, big difference in my life. Look through Maggie Thatcher and all the rest of them, There has never, fact, there has never been a government that done what they said they were going to do. Fact. And I don't need anybody to tell me what Labour didn't do. And I don't need anybody to tell me what the Tories have done, because we all know. I want somebody to turn up and tell me what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. But 24 and a half years ago, I got involved with Loaves and Fishes, And I thought it was going to be something we'd do for a couple of months. That's what I thought. I'll get involved with this, and I had a wee business at the time when I was fit. My joinery trade, I'm among the last of the 5-year men, Now we've not got any year men. Don't have apprentices. But anyway, I get involved in this charity. And we used to deal with furniture. Been it a few months, and I decide this isn't really what I thought it was going to be about. I really don't fancy this humping furniture upstairs and all that, and they're no in. You know, you get drug addicts coming to you. Need a suite. Need a suite, they need a house. But you get them the furniture and you take it to them and they're no in. Because their biggest need is getting sold down the road. And they're way to get that. And you're left with that furniture. But I turn up at a house in Pollock, Dormanside Road, and it changed my life. Literally. I go to this house, husband and wife, 2 wee boys, one's 6 and the Ryan's about 4, and she's pregnant. Drugs and alcohol's involved, right? And I go into the house, 3-apartment house. Apart from the fittings that comes with a house, the only item of furniture was a wardrobe. And it lay in the living room floor with the doors and the floor. And that's where the 4 of them slept. And there wasn't a mattress on it. And there wasn't sheets or pillows. And there was no blankets. So it was pouring the rain, they came home, they took their coats off, and they shook them dry, and the 4 of them slept in the top of that wardrobe. That's the guy's truth. We're privileged to play a part in that, you know. But you see, the problem has already been mentioned. The problem isn't homelessness. The problem is what causes that homelessness. Alcohol. Now, my wife's been going to meetings since 1992. And God's my judge. The only thing that changes is the faces and the date. That's all it's changed. They're still talking about things today that we were talking about in 1992. People not having a house. What are we going to do about it? And all these things, all these meetings are all held by social work departments. They're people that organise them, and it's good, eh? But 3 years down the line, the person's the chair moves on. Somebody else comes in and you're back to square one. Nothing gets built on. No, we nearly got rid of homelessness. I don't know if any of you went down Sucky Hall Street lately, or a Giles Street, or Union Street. Take a walk round at 10 o'clock at night, and there's hardly a doorstep that hasn't got somebody sleeping in it. And my wife spoke about that 7 years ago, when they were cutting back now. We're going to shut the big Eastern and we're going to shut this one because we don't want these big places with all these people. We're going to make it an 8-roomed. And my wife says to me, well, what are we going to do? She says, the restroom is coming along. She says, how are you going to manage if you can't get into your work in the morning? What do you mean? She says, there'll be people lying in the street sleeping. Don't talk stupid. Don't only bits you get rang. The people sleeping in the street are courteous enough to get up and move out before they want into their work. Maybe we should let them go down and sleep in George Square so where councillors can't get in. And then they'll not have any pay. If they get paid for what they do, they wouldn't have a pay. Because they don't do it. 2017, and we've got people sleeping in the street in an educated country. It's immoral. Totally immoral and wrong. 2017 in an educated country with all the amenities, plenty of it, but people can't eat. There's better going on during the war than there is going on now. I was born in 43, and they stopped the ration books in 53. And I remember going to the shops with my mum, and they'd tear out the coupon, and that's all the messages you could get. But see, they tore that coupon out. The woman in it, their purse, and paid for their groceries during the war and food shortage. And here we are in 2017 and there's no world war. There's that much food that's getting dumped. And people are coming to food banks because they've no money to buy food. That's wrong. You don't need to be the brain of Britain to work that out. David Mundell. They weren't telling you here's the gospel truth. I'm not telling you lies. Linda Fabiani asked me if I'd go to the welfare committee and speak, and I'd done it. And I don't know if that is a good thing or a bad thing or what. There's a man there, video and everything, and he put my speech on the video, and it went boom. Thankfully, I was sitting in Australia when it happened, because there was 400 calls come in. I didn't need to answer them, you know. But I said to him at the end of it, now, Dennis, what do you think the real problem is? You know, they think we're stupid. I said, yous. And Linda walked away laughing because I already told her. He said, what do you mean, us? I said, you tell that many lies, you wouldn't know the truth if you fell out of the tap yet. Oh, don't tell us all with one brush. I said, well, I do. Because see, every one of you stand up before voting. It's happening now. Vote for me and this is what I'll do for you. Eh? We vote for them. And 3 days later, they're telling what they're going to do is. No, we forget. What we forget is we are their employers. It's time we tell them what to do. Teresa's May's there because Sunday, enough clowns voted her in, eh? She's one shrewd woman. She's no stupid. Lies. There'll not be another general election in 2020. Oops, we're going to have one in a week's time. It's lies. And that's what it is. You've got a man that came to us at Christmas. Came to us for quite a while. And the lassie said to me at Christmas, we've no heard from so-and-so. Should you phone them? Aye, but we can't get up on the phone. So I try the phone, they answer. And I go down to his house. And I chap the door. Now this man, he's 64, eh? Bit of character, you know. Didn't he keep well? Really did he keep well. But he had a bit of joviality about him, you know, and winds you up a wee bit, you know. And comes to the door. And I hardly recognised this man. I said, what's the matter? He says, they've told me I'm fit for work. I said, well, you can appeal it and we'll get somebody to help you. He says, it's a waste of time. 10 days later, I get told I was terminally ill. What the hell's going on? When somebody can tell somebody they're fit, and a few days later they're told they're going to die. Who are these people? They're certainly no doctors, and they certainly don't look at a doctor's notes when they come in. Lift your hands above your head, pick that 2 pence up, you're fit for work. We've got a man now. They told him he's fit for work. He's not worked in over 12 years. He can hardly breathe, the guy. But he's fit for work. Told him 3 weeks ago. He came into me Monday morning greeting. Because he's got this letter telling him he's to pay his full rent. All benefits have been stopped. How does somebody pay a full rent when you're on the brew? And you've been getting benefits? What's happened to these guys that said, I said at the welfare committee, wee Gina, wee Tommy, does a wee job that they shouldn't do. And I'm not condoning it, but they take this wee job and they get themselves 20 quid. And they go and they buy butcher meat and they put it on the table for the kids. And they get caught. Their benefits are stopped instantly. They're branded a thief and a liar. On the other hand, we had wonderful ladies and gentlemen misusing expenses to the tune of 5 figures. And they were called gentlemen. Eh? And I said to them, I can't get my head around that one. I said, and the next one is the easiest of all. The companies that will not pay their proper tax. Because you just go and say, you have not paid the proper tax. You and you are the managing directors of this company. You've not paid your proper tax, and you've got to the end of next month to pay your tax. Or you and you as the managing directors are going to jail because it's against the law. How long does it take for you to get a letter after council if you've not paid your rent today? I'll be in tomorrow morning. They're sitting there ready to fire them out. First class posts. Yet these people owe billions. I don't know the actual figure, but there's a bit in the paper a wee while ago. I'll just pop figures out my head, for easiness. Let's say, to pay the benefits, it takes £1.5 million to pay the benefits. Tommy maybe know the exact figures. And they're paying £6 million, so they don't need to pay the benefits. That's your money. Why are we allowing that? Why are we allowing the misuse of our money to penalise people that's no good? Do you know what it is to get up and open a cupboard door and it's empty? There's nothing in it. And you look at your kids and you say, what am I going to do? How am I going to feed them tonight? And somebody says to you, go to Loaves and Fishes. And you spend the night walking the flare. What am I going to say to them? What if they say I can't get it? What am I going to do? And they come to our door and we open the door and they burst out greeting. And they can't talk to us. Yeah. They're humiliated. Humiliation is the worst sin on this earth. And there's if your government tells you we're doing good, I wonder how many of them, I'll even ask Tommy this one, would you be queuing up to be an MP if you had to spend a year on benefits or going to a food bank for grub? I served my time in it to serve 5 years. A few years ago, we had a treasurer that's never done a job. He's earning the money for the country. And now his pals told you he was a clown, eh? Jobs for the boys. You can say no, you can say anything you want. Christmas time. We're in 15 Curran Place. And there's a queue from our office right round to the back door. And it's the saddest Christmas I've spent in 20. You normally get a smile after them. Yeah. Maybe take a wee while. Got a wee sign in the door. No smile, no entry. And it works, eh? See, last year, we had mothers and fathers standing crying. East Kilbride, 3 days. 350 families walked through our door in East Kilbride. That's not counting what we put out to social work departments and welfare nurses. And some people say to me, well, they're maybe getting that twice. I said, good luck to them. I don't sit down to tinned meat. And David McDowell came and he invited me to his office in Edinburgh. And I got stew. And he's got his wee team with him that we're paying the money for, by the way. Come in, Mr. Curran. Only I can't talk the way they talk. My wife and I sat down. There's a bundle of papers in front of him. Well, Dennis, I just had invited you through to see what your thoughts are on food banks. I said, you're kidding me on, ain't you? You brought me all the way from East Kilbride to Edinburgh to ask me my thoughts, and they're on that paper there, because that's the minutes for the welfare committee. Oh, no, I don't mean it that way. Personally, what do you think? What's the problem? I said, yours. What do you mean? I said, you don't care. Oh, now, Dennis, I said, hold on a wee minute. You really don't care. Because if you can send a family away with kids with nothing to eat, you don't care. And I say to him, we could sit and talk about this all day. Why don't you come to your unit and spend a day with us? I said, come on a Monday or a Thursday, and you can come in at night, and we'll take you out at night and show you what we do at night and all. Oh, well, yes, that's quite an interesting idea. Let's wait till after Christmas. So I walked out the door. I've got to be honest here, I said to wife, that'll be it, you'll not see him. But after Christmas, I got a phone call, I got an email. He'd like to come, and he came. And he stayed for 2 hours. And I'll be honest with this part, I picked certain people to come the day he was coming. People that wasn't frightened to speak. No abusive, but to tell honestly and willing to tell their plight. And he stood outside my door at the end of 2 hours, and he's parting words to me, quote, "It's not right, Dennis, is it?" I says, "Talk cheap, what are you going to do?" 2 or 3 days later, he's photos in the paper opening a food bank. Why have you got food banks? Why have you got to go to work and get your money and then come home and put tins in a box for somebody else? When benefits were brought out, it was based on the national poverty line. So the national poverty line's now dropped. I was invited down to a talk, and this guy's talking about these people. That annoys me, these people. They're human beings, they're not these people, they're your neighbours. They might even be your pal or your mother or your sister. They need to be educated in how to budget their money. And I say to them, how do you budget your money if you get 75 quid a week and it's up to 30? I said, how do you budget your money when you get sanctioned and you don't get anything? It's total silence. Total silence. I get told through the radio station, they say, I think this is very, very sad. The manager told us to tell you then, we're very grateful if you come on at the last minute. We love it when you come on because it all stops Steve. We're sitting here killing ourselves, he doesn't know what to say. The topic's been changed. But the reason before you at the last minute is there's some people who know come on if they know you're coming on. What's that about? You've got all these ideas, it's wonderful, but you're not willing to sit and listen to somebody that disagrees with you. That's how you get to the truth, innit? I can't understand for the life of me how politicians can't come together and say, that's quite a good idea you've got. No, it's got to be their idea that works, nobody else's. That's how you and I don't come into the quota. We couldn't. We're cannon fodder. To feed. We stopped counting at Christmas over 1,000 families in a so-called wealthy community. I've been trying since 1992 to get premises. We've got ones now, but in the middle of no man's land. And we pay £700 a month for it. And we buy our food. We don't get the food donated for big companies. Your food comes for use, your donations. We buy it, and we get what it's doing to us. And we don't give you out of date, and we don't give you out bashed. Nothing wrong with an out-of-date tin. I said, well, my wife doesn't buy out-of-date tins. She doesn't go into our grocers and say, where's the aisle with the out-of-date and where's the aisle with the bashed? Eh? It's all right for you to eat it, but I'm certainly not eating it. This seems to be the attitude today. I can paper my walls with wee cards for people that stank us. And sometimes when I read them, there's a tear in my eye, eh? Thank you for getting us through Christmas. You saved our lives. You gave us a Christmas. At Christmas time there, every family that came to us. We tried to give them 2 boxes. A box of tins and a box of dry goods. And I carry a bag with toiletries. They get a £10 voucher for the butcher, a £5 voucher for farm foods. and the first 100 or 200 kids get a £25 voucher for the toy shop. What, you gave them a voucher? They wouldn't sell that. I said, well, didn't hear you shouting your MPs that misuse their expenses to 20 grand? You're worried about somebody getting 25 quid? And see, if they do misuse it, just maybe they're selling it so they can put money in the gas and they can cook the tins they've been getting. A wee woman sent us she gave it to the social worker. I can't thank Loaves and Fishes enough. It's the first time in years my cupboards have been full. And I've left all the doors open. And I keep running from my living room into the kitchen and pinching myself that I'm not sleeping. Because my cupboards are full of food. Is that not what should happen? Naturally, if you're on a living wage. What's a living wage? A living wage is when you go to work and you come home and you pay your bills and you pay your rent or your mortgage and your gas and your electricity and you go and you buy your groceries for the week or the month and you're able to take your kids out for a wee night out to the cinema or away down to McDonald's and put by for clothes and put by for a wee holiday and save up for Christmas. That's what a living age is. That's the real truth, eh? No getting told, oh, you're 2 minutes late. You're sanctioned. And Lassie came here. She had to sign on at 3 o'clock at 2 different bits in the same place, eh? Sign on to get her money and go and see somebody about what she's doing about a job. So where do you go first, eh? You go to sign on because you need your money. She go to the other place at 3:05 and they sanctioned her. Oh, why didn't she phone? No money for a phone. Don't have a phone. Have you ever tried phoning these places? The man I was talking about there and now was at Citizens Advice Bureau and they gave up trying to phone them. Nobody answers the phone. You just walk by it and let it ring. And people are getting sanctioned because somebody thinks they're not doing enough. And what I'm going to tell you is the truth. There was a meeting in our unit. The 5 social workers came here. And it's when all this came about. And this guy said, Dennis, I've just left a meeting. And we've been told the H is to get 8 people a week after the Bennett system by any means possible. Fully morning, the Herald done a wee story. And I wrote that in. Didn't give any names in that, I just put it in. And this MPO, the main name, was thankfully lost his seat. He was here and sadly was a Labour guy. We hear all these stories. Story? The man's left a meeting and that's a story. It normally comes from over-exuberant managers. So I usually hold them back and I said, why are these over-exuberant managers in a job where they're causing so much grief in people's life? I've never had a reply. It's no funny coming to a food bank. It's no easy coming to a food bank. There's nothing joyous about it. And nobody walks 3 and 4 miles in the pouring rain with 2 kids for a bag of tins they don't need. They come because they're desperate. We had the power to change that. Us. Use it.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Dennis Curran MBE. I think one of the key points about that as well is something to open my eyes to is campaigning in and around East Kilbride changed my view of, again, the town that I grew up in. I had people who had a nice suit, worked in a nice job, good living, nice house, all these things. Didn't think that these issues were their problems. There was this "I'm all right, Jack," and I'm like, what happens in your life for you to actually think that that's acceptable? Because the thing that they don't realise is, as I get, obviously a lot of the people there are people who are working full time, you know, but on a wage that they can't get by on. Worse than that, we're all one P45 away for finding ourselves in a very similar situation. None of us are protected about it. And again, as Mike touches on, if we've got another 10, 15, God knows what years of Tory in here, they want to dismantle that entire safety net that's to help people in that situation. So it's no one to forget. So moving on, folks. Well, our next speaker, I'm pretty certain, doesn't need any introduction. We've also said he doesn't need a mic as well, but we need it for the boys in Independence Live. Of course, he's a former MSP. He's part of the Solidarity Party movement, and indeed he's also involved in the Hope Over Fear rally, which goes on annually at Freedom Square. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tommy Sheridan.
So you need to use this for the live stream, right? Okay, Kevin. Thanks very much, Paul. And can I just say to Yes East Kilbride, brilliant, well done, fantastic turnout tonight. You are giving people, you're giving people the opportunity to not only hear arguments for yes when we get our next opportunity, but you're also illustrating the beauty of our country, the diversity of our country, and the real kernel of the movement that we are involved in. Because the movement we are involved in, I think, is akin to a big tent, massive big tent. The Yes movement isn't one political party, and it's no one political theory, and it's no one set of ideas, and it's no one vision. The Yes movement is a multitude of visions. It's a multitude of arguments. It's a multitude of political parties, and it's a multitude of people in no political party. We are all united here. We are all in unison in relation to the need for an independent Scotland. And yet, we will have different visions of what that independent Scotland is going to be like. That's not a problem. That is an advantage. That is something that should be celebrated. That is something that can be addressed when we have our independence. You see, I go back a long way with Mike here. And this is a precursor because I'm going to disagree with something that Mike says. So before I disagree with him, because he's a very good friend of mine, he's somebody who, he works very, very hard, Mike always has done. He's maybe known to have the odd wee sherbet on a Friday night, and sometimes he used to go onto Facebook when he'd had a wee couple of sherbets as well, and he used to have quite a lot of arguments with people on Facebook at one time, particularly when he was involved in promoting the No campaign. And Michael testified to this. I never ever abused or argued with Mike. In fact, I defended him a great many times, even though we were on the different side of the fence. I was very much for yes. Mike was very much for no. But as far as I was concerned, if I wanted to build a new, a better, a fairer, and a more inclusive Scotland, then I had to have in my mind that I wanted good people like Mike Daly being part of that independent Scotland. Even though at that time he was on the opposite side of the fence to me. Because I recognise what the guy done. I recognise when I was elected to the Scottish Parliament in 1999, and one of the big issues that I had promised to take up was the issue of warrant sales. The complete and utter travesty that since the Highland clearances, warrant sales had been used not as a form of debt collection, because they never ever collect debt. What they do is they humiliate people, they frighten people, they force people who are in debt to get even more debt. That's what warrant sales were all about. And in 1992, I'd been sent to jail for 6 months for opposing a warrant sale, a poll tax warrant sale in Scotland. And I said when I was elected to the City Council from my jail cell in Edinburgh, I said then that we would fight to abolish warrant sales. So in 1999, when I got into the Parliament, I laid the first private member's bill to get rid of warrant sales. Problem was, I didn't know how to write a bill. I just knew I wanted the idea. I didn't know, how do you write a bill? And I went to that man at the Govan Law Centre. And I says, Mike, can you help me? And Mike says, Tommy, I've never written a bill. But do you know what? It can't be that hard. I'll learn how to do it. And that's what he done. That's what he done. He'd never written a parliamentary bill before, but he wrote the abolition of Pindens and Warrant Sales Bill. That's what he did. And if you read up in the history of the Scottish Parliament, it tells you that the first private member's bill that was passed by that new Scottish Parliament was the abolition of Pindens and Warrant Sale Bill. But it doesn't tell you that he was the man that wrote it. And then, when we get rid of Pindens and Warrant Sales in the teeth of opposition, for that Labour mob who should have been ashamed of themselves, Mr. Donald Dewar, and I'm sorry here to go a wee bit of a diversification, but Mr. Donald Dewar might remember this story. There was to be a big debate in Parliament, and the local committee that had looked at the warrant sales bill had said, that's a great idea, we should support it. And the Labour Party would say, no, you can't support that. It's like Dennis says, it came from somebody different, so we can't support it. Even though it's a good idea, we can't support it. Even though it was in the first manifesto of the Independent Labour Party, way back in 1888 when Keir Hardie formed it, abolition of warrant sales was there. But because it came from me, Donald Dewar said, no, you can't support it. He was half sick at the time. He'd had a heart attack. He was half sick. Crawled out his sick bed to have an emergency group meeting of the Labour Party in the Friends Meeting House, which was about 50 yards for the Scottish Parliament building, because we were using the Church of Scotland building at that time, 1999. And he had a 3-line whip. He called in the Labour MSPs. And he said, what you have to do this afternoon is you have to vote down this bill. Vote down the abolition of warrant sales. Vote to keep the humiliation of the poor for getting into debt. That's what Donald Dewar, father of the bloody nation, got his sick bed today. Fortunately, there were enough Labour MSPs in that meeting who started to put up their hands and say, I can't go back to Pollock and say I voted to keep warrant sales. I can't go back to the Gorbals and say I voted to keep warrant sales. I can't go back to Dundee and say I voted to keep warrant sales. He had a revolt in his hands. And later that day, Mike was there in the chambers. Nobody knew what was going to happen. It's the first and only vote I've ever had in the Scottish Parliament where nobody knew the outcome of the vote. Because they're all sewn up beforehand. Please believe me. That one was supposed to be sewn up. It was supposed to be voted down. But there was a revolt, and a number of Labour MSPs abstained. Some of them even voted for the bill, and it left the Liberal Democrats with egg in their face. They didn't know what to do, so they abstained as well, and the only people that voted against it was the Tories, and we passed the abolition of Pindens and warrant sales. And you know, in that one act, Dennis Canavan made the point at that debate. He'd been in Parliament in Westminster for over 25 years, and he tried on 5 separate occasions to get the abolition of warrant sales discussed in Westminster, but there was never any time. With the new Scottish Parliament, we were able to get it discussed within a year of the Scottish Parliament being formed, and that bill itself showed the beauty and the value of having a Scottish Parliament where we could actually discuss issues that affected Scotland. And it's from my point of view that we then went on and took advantage of this man, because we said, okay, we've got that passed. What else can we do? Why don't we tackle the scourge of obesity, the means test embarrassment that a lot of children face because they need to claim a free school meal on the basis of showing that your mum and dad are in benefits? Why don't we, instead of means testing wains, why don't we introduce a system of free and healthy school meals for every kid in school? Why don't we do that? So we asked Mike, can you draw us up another bill? And he did that, the free school meals bill. And it was a fantastic campaign, wasn't it, Mike? We managed to get the STUC, the unions, the poverty groups, all involved in supporting that measure. Universal, healthy school meals when you go to school. You don't have to say, oh, I get a free school meal because my mum and dad are poor. Get rid of that nonsense. Let's make it universal so that we tackle the poor dietary reality that we have across Scotland, particularly the west of Scotland, but we also tackle the stigma of means testing for children. And you know what? We managed to get the SNP to back it. We got all the independents to back it. But who voted down free school meals in 2002 when we get that private members bill discussed? The Tories, the Liberals, who are now bumping their gums about free school meals. They voted it down in 2002. And the Labour Party, to their eternal shame in 2002, voted against universal free school meals. Brothers and sisters, the reason I tell you that is because that's why I never attacked that man. That's why I always defended that man, because even though he was campaigning against independence, I knew he had his own reasons for it, and I knew that there were honourable reasons at that time. And I knew that over time I would be working with that man regardless of the outcome, hopefully in an independent Scotland, to make Scotland a better place, because that's what he's dedicated his life to via the Govan Law Centre. Fairness and justice for working class people, people that don't have fairness and justice. So I think it's tremendous that we've had Mike to come here tonight and tell us that rather than being on different sides of the fence in the next referendum campaign, we're going to be campaigning together. Absolutely brilliant. We're going to be campaigning together, even though we'll have differences, we'll have nuances that we don't share. The reason, as Paul mentioned earlier, the Hope Over Fear campaign was formed at the start of the referendum campaign of 2014 is because me and people like me thought there was some questions that were getting papered over. There were some issues that were getting ignored. One of them was that we actually were socialists. And we didn't just want an independent Scotland, we wanted an independent socialist Scotland. That's what we wanted. And we felt this big massive Yes tent was big enough to accommodate us as well. The white paper that we were campaigning around was good, it had some good things in it, but it also had some problems. I don't agree that we keep the pound. I think we should have our own currency, our own Scottish currency, backed up by a Scottish bank, a publicly owned Scottish bank. So it was important in the big tent that you came up with something different that was getting said by the official Yes campaign. I didn't want the Bank of England to anything to do with an independent Scotland, I've got to say to you. I've also got to say that I didn't agree with the position of the Yes campaign officially when they were asked about the royal family. The line that appeared to be coming out was, and this happened quite a lot, nothing much will change. And I kept thinking, well, how can we inspire people if nothing much is going to change? But it seemed to be that there was going to be a slimmed down monarchy. And as I said at the time, I couldn't give a damn whether it was Weight Watchers or any other plan. I didn't want a slimmed down monarchy. I wanted a modern, democratic republic. That's what I wanted for Scotland. I wanted a Scotland where it didn't matter what family you were born into. Every child had the same opportunity to advance and develop. So from the point of view of the differences, I thought it was important that message was put out there as well, because some people weren't connecting with some of the things that were said by the official Yes campaign. And then it brings me to another argument. And again, let's not be frightened of these arguments. Let's not be frightened of disagreements. I consider myself European, absolutely. But I utterly oppose the European Union. I think the European Union is fundamentally an anti-democratic, pro-big business institution. Go and have a read at the Copenhagen Treaty. You will see that one of the absolute precursors to being a member of the European Union or to join the European Union is that you first and foremost promote free market economies. That's there. It's written into the Copenhagen Treaty. I've got to say to you, if we want to have trade deals with Europe, if we want to have relations with Europe, and we should develop free movement agreements, we should develop trading agreements, but we do it in the model of Norway, who are outside the European Union, rather than having a situation where, quite frankly, some of the things that I think the people of Scotland agree with, publicly owned railways, a mail service that's publicly owned, electricity that's publicly owned, gas that's publicly owned. Check the reality of the last 20 years, brothers and sisters. Who has been driving the privatization program across the whole of Europe? The European Union has been driving that program. It is a fact. I don't think anybody has looked at this yet. I'm sure they will in the next few days. But it is a fact that the manifesto that the Labour Party launched a couple of days ago, a manifesto that I think is radical, refreshing, has got a couple of things, key things which are missing, but is absolutely necessary and overwhelmingly should be embraced. But you know what? The European Union wouldn't allow it to be implemented. The European Union, because of the competition laws They wouldn't have allowed the creation of a public energy company. They won't allow the water to be taken back into public ownership in England and Wales. They won't allow the railways to be taken back. They'll say it's anti-competitive. Brothers and sisters, the reason I want an independent Scotland is so that the decisions that are made in Scotland can be implemented in Scotland. But the important point is not that we fall out about having a difference of opinion over these questions. As I said throughout the referendum campaign, and I repeat tonight, these are questions that we debate after independence. These are questions that in an independent Scotland we have proper, fair, open, informed referenda on. We don't have this stupid, horrible, distorted picture where multimillionaires can buy the influence because they can afford it. We have educated, informed debates about monarchy, about Europe, about currency. That's the position I think we should go into the next referendum on. Not telling people that if you vote yes, then you are voting for something else as well. No. What you see is, if you vote yes, you're voting for the right to decide those issues in the future. That's what you're voting for. And I think, brothers and sisters, that it's absolutely clear that we have the fundamental shift that was required to justify a second referendum. Some people will say it's because of the Brexit vote. And I disagree. I think that can be used as a justification. But quite frankly, brothers and sisters, for me, the fundamental shift was the 2015 general election. The 2015 general election. Because what happened was a political earthquake in Scotland. During that campaign, I had the pleasure to address 121 meetings in every corner of Scotland. I had the pleasure to speak to tens of thousands of people all over our country. If I had, at those meetings, predicted that in less than a year's time, the Labour Party would be reduced to one MP in the whole of Scotland, I would have been laughed out of town. People would have said, you need to get the white coats for that boy. What you had in 2015 was a political tremor that turned into an earthquake that, as far as I'm concerned, changed the rules. That's what I think justifies a second referendum. Because in that general election, the people of Scotland showed that they recognised they were lied to, they were bullied, they were fed a lot of distorted stories by a British biased corporation. Independence wasn't about taking away pensions. Independence wasn't about B&Q closing. Independence wasn't about the Great Depression happening all over again. That's what we were told. And shamefully, the Scottish Labour Party wrapped themselves up in a Union Jack next to the Tories, and they will never be forgiven for what they did during that campaign. Never. In 2015, people like myself, socialists, took it upon ourselves to argue, perhaps against the grain. We argued, don't stand as a socialist in that general election. Instead, lend your vote to the SNP, unite the Yes movement, and let's get rid of, at that time, the red, the yellow, and the blue Tories. That's the strategy of 2015. And it was almost universally successful. I say to the Greens, you were wrong. You were wrong to stand in Mundell's seat. If you hadn't stood, we would have got rid of Mundell. I'm glad they appear to have learned that lesson and will not stand this time. 56 out of the 59 seats went to the SNP. That was a massive endorsement of the Yes movement, of the Yes campaign. The SNP have to bear in mind, however, people like me and thousands like me, we said that we're supporting you to go down to Westminster, not to settle down, but to settle up with Westminster. I'm personally not interested in how many committees and how many chairmanships and how many papers come out based on SNP MPs. I don't want them to help Westminster run. I want them to cause mayhem and chaos. Westminster and the UK is a busted flush. It's over. It's an institution whose time has gone. And that's why, in 3 weeks' time, we have another general election. And I hesitate this time in relation to my description of the Labour Party. Because there is a difference. Miliband leading the Labour Party, you wouldn't trust them to run a bloody bath, never mind a country. You could easily call them the Red Tories, no doubt about it. And even in Scotland, if we're honest about it, your Keza Dugdales, your Ian Murrays, you could even call them Red Tories. But where I draw the line is Jeremy Corbyn is not a Red Tory, brothers and sisters. Jeremy Corbyn has been ill-advised from people in Scotland. Jeremy Corbyn put a tweet out. I don't know if any of you seen it. It's a very good tweet. In March, 13th of March, I forgot my glasses. And it says, if, however, the Scottish Parliament votes to have Indy Ref 2, Labour will not block that democratic decision at Westminster. You have to ask yourself, 13th of March, Jeremy Corbyn says the right thing. Okay, he says he doesn't agree with independence, that's fine. But he says they will not block it at Westminster. Why then do you get a manifesto out a couple of days ago saying that they're going to block Indy Ref 2? Brothers and sisters, that's bad advice that Jeremy's getting from Scotland. That's the truth of the matter. What I think we have to do here in Scotland, and as a socialist, it is difficult. Yes, it's difficult. Because I'm over the moon to see public ownership back on the political agenda. I'm over the moon with the Labour manifesto in relation to taxing the corporations, to increasing the tax rate for the wealthy. Over the moon. Brilliant. Brilliant that they're talking about taking over the water companies. Brilliant that they're talking about taking back rail. Brilliant that they're talking about taking back energy. Absolutely fantastic. Problem is, here in Scotland, we have a different political spectrum. We have a different political terrain. As far as I'm concerned, brothers and sisters, and Nicola said this as soon as the election was called, she said, what we need is a progressive alliance in Westminster, a progressive alliance. I think we should be saying, loud and clear here in Scotland, socialists like me, we should be saying, in Scotland, unite behind the SNP candidate, the progressive anti-Tory candidate. Let's get the Tories wiped out in Scotland. Vote for the candidate that is most likely to beat the Tories, and in Scotland, in reality, that means the SNP. But unlike in 2015, I think we need to go further. I think we need to appeal to our friends, our family, our extended family, anyone we know in England and Wales. We have to say, vote for Corbyn's manifesto in England and Wales. You couldn't have said that in 2015, because what did Ed Miliband offer? Ed Miliband says, we support austerity as well. It's just that we'll do it slower than the Tories are doing it. That's not what Corbyn's saying. So I think those of us within the Yes movement who believe in a progressive Scotland, who believe in a fairer Scotland, a better Scotland, I think what we should be saying is SNP in 3 weeks' time, and in England and Wales, apart from the 3 Plaid Cymru seats in Wales, I think we should be saying, endorse the Corbyn manifesto. And I've got to say, I would like to hear from the front bench of the SNP as well, because here's the negotiating position, isn't it? It's quite clear. SNP front bench has to say that they support redistributive taxation, has to say that they support public ownership, has to say that they support the corporations being taxed more, has to say that they support the Robin Hood tax on international transactions, has to say they support the levy on companies that are paying their employees over £300,000. Come out, SNP front bench, and say loud and clear that you support those progressive measures. And on June the 9th, if the Labour Party has enough MPs to form a minority, and it needs the support of the hopefully 59 SNP MPs, then the quid pro quo is right in front of us, isn't it? The quid pro quo is, yes, Labour, we will support your manifesto, we'll support your progressive taxation, we'll support your public ownership, but in return, we demand, number 1, Indie Ref 2. And number 2, we demand the cancellation of Trident. We don't accept that £200 billion of public money, when you've got poverty and food banks all across this country, we don't accept that you should waste £200 billion of public money on scrap metal, because that's all they are, scrap metal. If they're ever used, the world's ended anyway. So why don't we live for today and invest in health and education and our children, rather than spending another brass farthing on weapons of mass destruction? And by the way, if that's a stumbling block, if Jeremy can't carry, because I know that Jeremy supports that. I know Jeremy personally, and I know that he's been a very keen nuclear disarmament all of his political life. But if he can't convince enough of these new MPs elected, then we've got a simple solution. Take it down to Westminster. Put it in the River Thames. There's one way to convince Westminster to vote against Trident. Park it in the River Thames outside Westminster. I'll finish my contribution, brothers and sisters, by reminding you that when we kicked off the 2014 campaign, at the end of 2013, the polls, the opinion polls at the time, they were varied, but they showed between 29% and 32% support for independence. 12 months later, and despite the British establishment exposing its brutality and its biased operation, despite the lies, despite the bullying, despite the distortions, we went from 29% to 45%. Brothers and sisters, I'm absolutely convinced that whether it's 2018, that's when I would like to see it, or whether it's 2019, we can turn the 45 into 60% for independence. Thanks very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Thomas Sheridan. So folks, apologies, we're running quite behind schedule, obviously running a bit late. We will get through some questions. So obviously if you've got a question, we'll ask you to put your hand up and our lovely assistant will come round and obviously give you a shot at the mic. If we could just ask if you give us your name when you stand, and keep the question brief because we want to get through as much as possible. So we're going to take them in rounds of 3, and we're just going to start off actually with some that's come in over the stream online through Independence Live. So the first one I think's just been answered. It's from Casey Jones, who's asked who do we vote for in Scotland in the Westminster election. Well, I think Thomas just summed that one up for you, Casey. We'll take the next question from the lady
I'm
in the
just
crowd
wondering
there.
if we could have a short break first before we go into questions.
Time, unfortunately, we're running behind. Apologies. Anyone else? Gentleman there, please, John.
Thanks. John Riley, I'm not a member of any political party. I was involved with SNP for 25 years, and of course I've always supported independence and believe Scotland's future should be in Scotland's hands, free from Westminster but also free from Brussels, and that's where I'm with Tommy on that one. I've left SNP in disgust because after the vote that we had last year, to see the First Minister running around Europe trying to justify Scotland's position has just put me right off, totally put me off. So how do we keep the 38%, the over a million Scots who voted to leave the European Union, how do you keep them on side? Because we're no racists and we're no bigots. We're entitled to have our opinion, as Tommy says. You need to, don't alienate them. That's the most important thing out for me, anyway.
Next one, John, we'll take them in 3. Just gentleman at the side.
Samuel Cookin. My question kind of directed at Mike, being a former Labour Party member who's now joined the SNP. Online I've been having a lot of trouble with SNP members and supporters who don't seem to support the Corbyn agenda. So as I'd say you were a socialist, being a Labour Party member and considering what you stand for, what's your views on the SNP endorsing Corbyn and supporting Corbyn and working with the Labour Party?
More, John. We have a lady this time, possibly. Well, sorry, Bobby.
Hi, my name's Bobby Russell. I own a local driving school here. Now, I see a lot of kids. I'm talking about 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, things like that. And I talk to a lot of people. The other day there, I went to a Cameroonian dude down in Douglas. And I was picking my brother up. What I'm basing this on is stupidity and ignorance. If you just listen to me here, right? So I picked my brother up after the Cameroonian dude. I had my medals on, right? I served in the army. I walked into my bowling club, which is in Edelwood in Hamilton. And this wee lad says, "Is that golfing medals you've got on?" Right? I said, "Oh, how stupid are you, son?" So I went and sat down with my brother. And they all know I am SNP, independence, the full shebang. And for me, sitting with a bunch of folk who came from a mining community that I did and support the Tories. Now, I'm going to tell you why they're supporting the Tories. It's sort of day with the Union, the Queen, the Union Jack. That's why they're supporting the Tories. And I'm going to put it down to here to stupidity, ignorance, religion. West of Scotland, as we know, Rangers, Celtic, Catholic, Protestant. I have nothing to do with that at all. I'm no religious one bit. I fought in the army for this bloody country. I've seen a lot of people being killed and God knows what. To me, religion has caused a lot of deaths in this world. And they turn around and says to me, "Oh, I'm voting. I'm a Rangers supporter. I should support that." What? I'm an Orangeman. I should support that. For God's sake, get heed out your backsides. I was going to say something else there. But that's what I think of Scotland at the moment, especially west of Scotland. Rangers, Celtic, Catholic, Protestant, totally ignorance and stupidity.
So what's your question, Bobby? Sorry, hurry you along.
Oh, I'm sorry. What I want to know is how are we going to turn these people around?
Okay.
That's all I want to know.
Okay, so we'll start off with the first question. Tommy, I think the first one maybe for you with regards to the people who voted to leave within the EU.
John, I think you touched on a very important question, and I actually think the SNP leadership may have begun to realise that you cannot tie India F2 to European Union membership. You just can't tie them. Because I know of many, many progressive Scots. You talk about people voting against the European Union. The reason people voted against the European Union membership has got nothing to do with the Farages of the world, nothing to do with that horrible bigoted attitude to immigrants or people wanting to come and live and work in our country. On the contrary, people like me and people like yourself who voted against the European Union welcome people coming and living and working in our country, working with good wages, good employment conditions. We don't reject new people coming, but we do reject a big bosses club that can dictate to us what we can and can't do politically and economically. I seek refuge in one of my heroes, Tony Benn. Tony Benn was one of the most ardent anti-European Union campaigners, based on democracy, based on that basis of when you vote for something, you should be able to get it if that political party wins elections. And the truth is, the European Union has been used as nothing more than a club over the last 10 years to batter Greece, to batter Ireland, to batter Portugal, to batter them into submission and to get them to support austerity measures that impoverishes millions of people across those countries. I don't accept that as a way forward. However, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, what we do when we're independent is we have the debate. And you get people like me and maybe Mike or maybe others, and we'll be on different sides of this argument. But it'll be a positive argument. It'll be an informed argument. It'll be an educated argument. It won't be a xenophobic argument. It won't be about getting an extra £350 million a week into the NHS if you vote a certain way. It will be based on mature adult conversation. I'll be saying, don't join the European Union. Let's have our own trade deals the way Norway does and others do. Others will be saying, no, let's join the European Union. And if I lose that vote, I lose that vote. At least the people of Scotland will have decided democratically.
No, I mean, I'm happy to. I mean, I can be very brief because obviously there's other questions as well. But just in terms of the three questions, I mean, I am very much pro-European. I think Theresa May had said, and the Tories have been doing this line, which is, we're not leaving Europe, we're leaving the EU. Well, if you really want to work in Europe, you've got to have some type of membership. Now, I've suggested earlier we can join EFTA, which other countries have joined, the EEA. In fact, the Nordic Council is a possibility too, given Scotland's geographical location. So, and I think in some respects, the idea of just simply an independent Scotland joining the EU like that, I'm not convinced that is feasible in any event. So I would have thought that whatever your position is, ultimately we do need to have the free access to free trade agreements, and the way to do that is through the EEA and EFTA. The whole issue of the EU itself is something that is not completely within our gift in any event. So it may well be that the practicalities of that result in a solution for some people. But in terms of the other questions, very quickly, had asked the question about Jeremy Corbyn's manifesto. Now, obviously, the SNP is a broad church. You've got people from the left to, dare I say it, to the right, because that's the nature. Everyone's united by the idea of Scotland being independent. But I certainly think there's lots of things in Jeremy Corbyn's manifesto that I find incredibly progressive and attractive. And there's lots of things, of course, that are reserved to Westminster. So if you think about, the idea of nationalisation for certain industries, or indeed economic regulation, to be able to regulate, for example, pricing, which is well, the Tories have mooted it with the idea of saving you £100 a year. I mean, effectively, their manifesto, as far as I could work out, is taking everything away from you, possibly giving you £100 off your fuel bills and bringing back fox hunting. That's kind of it. But there's certainly lots of incredibly progressive things in the Corbyn manifesto, which I certainly do embrace and do support. No question about that. And in terms of local government, as I said earlier as well, Sam, there's no reason why the SNP and Labour shouldn't be working in local government together and keeping out the Tories. I mean, that to me is an absolute no-brainer. Was it Bob? It's funny, I remember the first time coming to Glasgow about age 19, and I didn't really understand the thing of sectarianism, because we never really had it on the East Coast. People told me when I supported Dundee FC as opposed to United as a Catholic that I should have supported United. Nobody told me. So we never really had that. I remember bringing my mum through to Govan. She said, "Oh son, what's that lovely procession and all the flutes?" the innocence of my dear sweet late mother, because you don't get that on the East Coast. So it is very much a West Coast thing. I have to say, I think Ruth Davidson has behaved appallingly. They call it dog whistle politics, where you put out a message which has really got, well, in the case of Ruth Davidson, not so subliminal, but what you're really doing is playing to the lowest common denominator, and she's been doing that big style. I think she's lost the plot when it comes to this. But that just goes to show you how the Tories will stoop so low. They're not interested in the peace process over in Northern Ireland. They're not really interested. They're just interested in taking advantage of people's long-standing issues. And I don't think you display any of the qualities of leadership if you do something like that It's absolutely appalling. We've got a big, tackling sectarianism is a massive issue for the West Coast of Scotland. There's no doubt about it. So having, the first thing to say is, we shouldn't have people in Scotland as politicians that make it worse. And I think Ruth Davidson has made it worse.
I'm not really up to a lot of things, Independent Scotland. Very, very simple. You don't want an independent Scotland, you don't vote. You get a Tory government. Then you've just got to accept that forever, ever, whatever the vote in England, we're going to get. Because a total 5 million here. There's double that in London itself. So we don't need to bother voting, it's just whatever they're going to do, we're going to get. And the past has shown we don't get a lot. We don't get a lot. Poll tax started in Scotland. There are still people trying to pay their poll tax off here. It was abolished in England. It was abolished in England. But the people here are still trying to pay it off. And as a fact, there's some people go to a job. And part of their interview, they discover that they've not paid their poll tax, they're not getting a job. And sectarianism. I go into the street on a Monday and a Thursday night, we feed homeless. But a simple way of dealing with it. I was brought up, I'm blessed I was brought up with a family that wasn't tolerated. I was brought up to respect a man for what a man done and how he conducted himself. Not for what colour he was or what faith he was. And I say to the guys there, because sometimes you go in and you hear comments like, or a package soap. And I say to them, see when you take ill, the white doctor comes to you, and you're lying there desperate ill, do you say, you're a Catholic, you're a Protestant? You say, going to help me. And when the coloured doctor turns up, you don't say, I don't want you, you're coloured. You say, going to help me. And see, when they get the help, they walk back out the door and they pick up their ignorance again. Because that's what they saw doing, ignorance. It starts from school. It starts from the home. Children are what they are taught. If you don't teach them, they don't know. Thank you.
We're going to take another couple of questions again, squeeze a few more in. So the ones we're going to take are also coming in through the Independence Live. First question is from Rog McDowell. How do we ensure that ordinary people in Scotland, in our communities, are empowered to become architects of a future independent Scotland? Anne Ross has also asked, is there any chance of reducing one Labour MP to one? In fact, what's the chances of getting rid of all the unionist parties? And I'm assuming she's talking about the election now. The next one is from James Clark. He's got a slightly different view. He says, do you have jobs for the people that will be out of jobs when you get rid of Trident? Or are you going to give them pea shooters and stand them at the coast?
The last question is certainly the easiest question. I was councillor for a city council in Glasgow for 11 years, and then elected to the Parliament in 1999. And in 2002, I wrote to the former chief executive of Glasgow City Council, a guy called Jimmy Andrews, and I wrote to him because the running costs, the annual running costs of Trident at that time was £1 billion. And the STUC and other organisations had done an analysis of the number of jobs directly dependent on Trident, how many jobs were generated by Trident. And it ranged. The largest number, they said, was about 1,500. Direct employment was 500. But they said ancillary jobs, you could say maybe as many as 1,500. So I wrote to Jimmy Andrews and I said, Jimmy, as a Director, Chief Executive of Glasgow City Council, see if I gave you £1 billion a year, how many jobs would that represent? Well-paid jobs would that represent for Glasgow if you had £1 billion a year? And he wrote back to me and he broke it down, and it was jobs in excess of £25,000 a year, pay 20,000 jobs. 20,000 jobs. We have a duty to oppose Trident on a moral basis, because those weapons of mass destruction are immoral. So I'm not going to hide for that. But we also have a duty to oppose Trident on an economic basis, because it's a waste of money. You could create tens of thousands of extra jobs if you took that money and invested it in public sector jobs instead of in Trident. So it's a very easy question, James. That's what we're going to do when we cancel Trident. We're going to create more jobs, and we're going to create a more peaceful Scotland. The other two questions, I think, have largely been answered in terms of the voting thing, although I think it was Rob said, how can we create ambassadors? Everybody has to be an ambassador, folks. Everybody. We can't have a position of leaders and followers. We need a position of ambassadors. Every single one of us has to be ambassadors. And my final wee point, because I never get a chance, I didn't realise at the time where we answered the three questions, but my answer to Bobby, it is tragic, Bobby. Tragic to hear what you're saying, that unionism in its most virulent form may now be taking the form of people voting Tory from a working class background, particularly a mining community, for God's sake. They ought to be ashamed of themselves, is the truth of the matter. They ought to be ashamed of themselves. The way to tackle it, in my opinion, Bobby, is we need to go into the next independence referendum with working class issues to the fore. We need to go into that referendum with a guarantee that in a new future independent Scotland, we're going to do away with one of the worst terms that has creeped into the English language: working poor. Working poor. It is a complete and utter travesty that we use that term. Why the hell should anybody be poor if they're working? We should have a living wage, guaranteed employment rights, a proper retirement age so that you can actually enjoy your retirement instead of working yourself into a grave. And if we do that, Bobby, I'm confident that we can reach beyond that facade of unionism and appeal to people's class instinct rather than the religious instinct. That's what we can do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with anything that Tommy said. I mean, to answer, I think Rob's raised a really interesting one in terms of how do we empower people in communities. And I think what I find, and I'm very optimistic about this, because I've been going around the country in the last few months and doing talks, and more than just doing talks, more actually having a discussion, because I think it's about discussing the issues with people. And one of the talks I did was in Perth, and what I found very significant was that in 2014 there wasn't a Yes Perth City, but there is one now. And they've already got themselves organised. And obviously, you've done the same in East Kilbride. I went over to Fife, and they've done the same too. They've done the same. I was down in Gourock the other week, and they've done the same. So the point I'm making is that those organisations are not party political. They're all inclusive. It's for anybody who supports Scottish independence. They've got people already teed up in terms of people that will be activists. They've got materials in terms of promoting the issue. And they never had that in many places in Scotland in 2013, 2014. So I think Tommy's absolutely right. I think things have changed. The support for Scottish independence is already a lot higher than it was. And I think that the way to win it is it's going to be one, I think, in communities. And what we need to do is make sure that we've got people that are able to speak to neighbours. And I'll finish on this point if I can, Paul, which is that I think we need to have a different strategy in terms of, say, 2014. It's got to be about persuading people. It's not, if somebody has a different view to you, I don't think there's anything to be gained from criticising them. You're never going to persuade somebody, if you attack them. So we need to be in the business of persuading people, understanding that people have got concerns, understanding that they've got worries about particular things, which are often misinformation. And we need to present people with the solid facts, but also give them, I think, the option, which is that, look, unlike in 2014, we do have this crossroads in Scotland, and you've got Theresa May, Ruth Davidson, and darkness jumping off the edge of a cliff like a lemming, or you've got the ability for Scotland to take its own path, have its own destiny, and a destiny where, if you think about it, we've got so much talent, we've got so much in the way of natural resources, we've got everything going for us. So that's the optimistic vision that I think we need to be persuading people. And of course we can have our own currency. Of course we can do all the things that people say you can't do. And we've also got a great amount of, I think, support from various European countries too. We've got a lot in our favour. And that's a much better future to tell people and talk to people about in local communities than saying we're going to have another 15 years of Tories. I mean, Tories are already talking about more cuts to benefits. I mean, how could it's hard to imagine what more they can do because they've done so many negative things. So I think that's the way we're going to win this.
Tends to be sometimes a wee bit just plain black and white. Trident. Why have we got Trident? Deterrent. Why is it with us? See if there's a war, we don't need to worry about anything. Because that's the first place it's going to get hit. Because that's where all the repairs get done. That's what everything gets done. So why is it, if it's all that important, why have they not got it done in England? How many jobs does it create? It's been proven time and time again. As you close one thing, something else comes back up. Create a wee atmosphere around something, and everybody's arguing about it, and they're not really seeing what's going on in the background. And it's what? No peace, no war. No war, no peace. You seem to live in that. One of the things that I dislike is to walk down the street, and the language I hear is terrible. People can't seem to talk without swearing. And one thing I know about swearing, and it creates anger. When you swear, you start to get upset, and you start to get angry, and the next minute you lose the place. And we're letting all the good things. We are at fault because we are characters of our parents. And every one of us is in a show window. We're on display. What is it we're showing? What is it we're making attractive to us that people want? See, we seem to have done away with that. We're letting kids seem to do what they want. You can't chastise them, eh? I get belt across the ear a lot of times, eh? My father never hit me. I never chanced it with my dad, but my mother belted me. Never done me any good. It taught me to know you don't do that again. Simple. But now we're all caught up in correctness. What's correct about arming a country that can set off something that's going to destroy another part of a country? That's simple. Wrap up in a wee parcel, say, you want to Trident here? I can guarantee you Lizzie doesn't want to outside her door.
Ladies and gentlemen, apologies, we've actually run out of time. We won't have time for any more questions. Just before we kind of move on to thank everybody that's came along tonight, I just wanted to point out with regards to obviously tonight's session has been streamed across the internet, across the world, thanks to the guys at Independence Live. And the actual reality of it is we've got, you know, up to 17,000 viewers watching this tonight. Obviously not full concurrent, but that's impressive. So, listen, just obviously the reason we raise it as well is these guys are the heart and soul of the campaign, have been for all the time since 2014. So I know you've gave us a bit of change in that, and we're truly thankful for it, but if you don't forget the guys, because they don't get any funding, it's really just any contributions that anyone can give at all, so thanks if that's possible. So thanks to the guys from Independence Live. And of course, you know, the stars of the show pretty much, I mean, astounded. You know, again, we've been really fortunate to some fantastic speakers with varied views. I just apologise we couldn't get through more questions. Ladies and gentlemen, our fantastic speakers, Mr. Tommy Sheridan. And of course, the inspirational Mr. Dennis Curran, MB. And one who obviously brings about the kind of subject matter, encapsulates it more than certainly the other speakers of the night. Again, the further inspirational Mr. Mike Daly. And of course, I just want to thank everybody that's came out tonight. I know we're in competition with football and TV and various other bits and pieces. And I know we're slap bang in between two national elections. So I know we're probably fed up with politics and stuff. So the fact is you've come out tonight, the fact that you're tuning in online speaks volumes. So appreciate it again for coming and enjoying that tonight. The only thing is there's been some sign-in sheets coming through just to explain what them are about. One is to join our Yes East Kilbride mailing list, which will keep you in advance of any of the events, which many that we've got planned up for certainly the remainder of the year. The other one is if you wish to join, because look, we've got quite a small group. I get that everybody, especially the ones that are involved in political parties, are out doing stuff, but we need you to come and help us because East Kilbride's got a lot of people in it and we want to keep them informed as best as we possibly can. So if you've got any spare time, come out and join us. Everybody is welcome. The other people I want to thank, it's kept you nice and refreshed all night, is obviously our tea ladies, as we'll call them. That's both Naz and Yvonne. I hope you enjoyed the nice Yes and saltire cakes. I went a lot of effort to bake them. But just to speak briefly about Yes East Kilbride, and the guys summed it up perfectly, better than certainly that I could, is Yes East Kilbride is all parties and none. We're not here to push any particular political party. And perfectly as Tommy, which has always been the thing that inspired me more than anything else, part of the great thing is that we don't all agree on this stuff. But we do agree in that one thing is that we can improve the chances for not just us, not for our kids, their grandkids and then thereafter, if we've got the control in our own hands. And to be fair, as a campaign in East Kilbride, we will not stop until that goal is achieved. So, ladies and gentlemen, I bid you all a safe onward journey, and thanks again. Hope to see you again at some point in the future. Thanks again. Good night.